Here's a story from CNN. U.S. Marine Rapid Response Force moving toward Israel as Pentagon strengthens military posture in region. I love how they're very careful with their headline. Let's be real. This is a deployment. But here's how they phrase it. As after you read the headline, moving towards, what does that mean? A U.S. Marine Rapid Response Force is headed to the waters off the coast of Israel, and the Pentagon is preparing American troops for a potential deployment to the country, escalating the U.S.'s show of force in the region as it works to prevent the conflict between Israel and Hamas from widening any further. A defense official familiar with the planning said the Rapid Response Force, consisting of 2,000 Marines and sailors, is being sent. It will join a growing number of U.S. warships and forces converging on Israel as the U.S. seeks to send a message of deterrence to Iran and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah. On Sunday evening, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin ordered that roughly 2,000 troops prepare for a potential deployment to Israel to help with the tasks like medical and logistical support, multiple defense officials says. In other words, the U.S. is entering the war.
Yes. No, we're just entering near the war. We're just moving towards the war. I hate that phrasing. I think that's so lame.
Well, we did that in Kiev, too, because we have special forces in Kiev hanging out.
And we haven't declared a war since World War II, so this is just more run-of-the-mill.
Well, we don't have a House Speaker, so we can't really declare much of anything at all.
Oh, golly. What
Maybe
timing.
that's good then, though.
Maybe that's good.
That's the silver lining to that situation.
Well, the only issue, though, is that, of course, Biden can do pretty much whatever he wants, which is what we're seeing play out right now.
Kind of makes
But
you
it's not
wonder.
really Biden. I mean, Biden's staffers can do whatever they want.
It kind of makes you wonder about the timing because they kept not working on Sunday or not working Saturday, not working Sunday, not working Monday. And it's like they were putting off this vote. And now all of a sudden there are Marines headed to Israel without Congress even in session. Like, I mean.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That is pretty upsetting, actually.
So here's what happens. I'm not saying this is definitive, absolutely going to happen. But how do you as the president get the U.S. into a war without a declaration from Congress? Well, for the most part, they've just done it. They just send the troops. They send U.S. Marines and warships into the Mediterranean. They send it into Israeli waters. And then what happens when Hezbollah attacks? Now you don't need a declaration. Now it's, we're being fired upon. We have to react.
Our ships that we put there strategically are now under attack.
That's right.
It's crazy how that happens.
What's wild is remember when they said Trump was going to start World War III and how Biden came in and said now the adults are in charge.
Oh.
And then he proceeded to destroy everything.
But
like, piece
how
by
long
piece.
until they're like, well, actually, this is all Trump's fault in the first place anyways. If Trump had never
Did
been
they already say
president.
that?
I feel like they'll always say it, but there'll be some specific statement from Biden that's like, ultimately, this is all Trump's fault, even though I have been in office for basically
Hamas
the
would
last
not
year.
have escalated if not for Donald Trump doing nothing. I don't know. He'll come up with
Well,
something.
Hamas has been planning this attack for 2 years, which is basically when Biden took office.
Yes.
They started planning this attack.
Exactly.
Because when Trump was in office, he was strong enough. He had an interesting quote today. He was speaking in Iowa, and he said that his personality had kept us out of war.
That's not wrong.
It's
though.
entirely right. I mean, as I've said about Trump in the past, like the thing about Trump is he appears to be an absolute crazy man, and you stay away from a crazy man. A crazy man will do crazy things. So you kind of back off, you let him do his whole crazy thing. And that's a big part of what made him so effective is that he was unpredictable. You never quite knew what kind of thing he was going to do, right down to the Abraham Accords, which were actually pretty genius because they were these bilateral agreements.
Well, that's kind of the opposite. I mean, it's not just that Trump threatened to nuke Moscow and what else? What else did he threaten to Moscow and
Was it Iran?
China
It
a
was
little bit
Iran
as
that-
well.
China? Well, which city was it? He said he was gonna. There was two cities.
Nuke the shit out of one, right?
He said no. He has that famous quote where he said he would nuke Moscow and then Beijing.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm like, it wasn't Xinjiang. I mean, that's not what it was. Beijing, right? Of course.
He also
duh.
had that threat that he did on Twitter at the time about like, do not come at me, Iran, or something like you will experience like a hell you've never seen before.
But
Yeah.
I think for Russia, for instance, they have no reason to invade Ukraine when Donald Trump is saying we're getting our troops out of the Middle East. This is ridiculous. You know, what are we here for? Oil. And so that was a big part of the conflict is the U.S. basically trying to force Russia's energy business into the gutter. And instead of competing on the open market, when Donald Trump starts saying, look, we're not going to go to war over this. We're going to do energy our way. We're going to start drilling for oil in the United States. We've got Alaska. We could do all these things. And he did. And gas prices go down. Now, gas prices went down dramatically. People failed to mention this because of COVID. because demand was in the gutter and they had to give oil away. It was crazy. But it still was relatively cheap even before this. And so Russia's incentive for war is minimal. Then you get the Abraham Accords. Why? Because there's an economic incentive now from the West. I mean, this is brilliant stuff. But what happens then is the left is arguing that this conflict between Hamas and Israel is Trump's fault because of the Abraham Accords, because it marginalized and sidelined Hamas, and their only reaction was going to maybe be military conflict. And I'll push back on that and say, if Donald Trump's policies were still in place, then the incentives of Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the Emirates, etc., would be to align with Israel because their deal is being jeopardized by the actions of Hamas. Instead, you get Joe Biden and his administration that doesn't care for these negotiations and wants war.
Well, and that's exactly what happened, right? You have Saudi Arabia, which was doing negotiations with Israel. They were cooling some tensions, and now that has totally been scuttled as a result of the Hamas attack. So I think that's been pretty effective. And if what the Biden administration wants is permanent war, which it does seem like that is what they're interested in, then it would make sense that they would continue to help escalate the situation.
I mean, it always, I can't help but think of months before Russia invaded Ukraine, there was that phone call between Putin and Biden where Putin said, if you promise that they are not going to join NATO, we will not invade Ukraine. And I just can only imagine, I don't know what Biden said in response other than, no, we're not going to do that. But I can only imagine these two personalities were not going to have a productive conversation. The relationship between the U.S. and Russia was the strongest, at least in most recent years, when Donald Trump was in office because Putin respects him more than he respects Biden.
Yeah, you also had Kamala Harris coming out saying that Ukraine was going to join NATO at some point. You have all of these overtures from the EU to bring Ukraine in. And doesn't Ukraine mean borderlands essentially?
Yeah.
So if you take Ukraine away, then suddenly Europe and NATO and the EU are right on the doorstep of Russia, and that's a threat to them. There needs to be
we act like
they want this barrier.
Right. We act like they're concerned that the NATO border is being expanded directly next to them is sort of absurd when it's not. I mean, you can disagree with all kinds of other things, but this idea that this was one of the contingencies for not invading and that Biden just said, no, I'm against this and whatever, obviously we're setting, the Biden administration did not take steps that were necessary to de-escalate a situation. In fact, now that we see that apparently Yellen is like, yes, we can afford another war. Of course they want another war because who among them makes money? Probably all of them.
We also have this tweet from someone, I don't know who, but it's under the Biden Twitter account, X account, saying an attack on one group of us is an attack on all of us. In America, hate will not prevail. Venom and violence against any one community cannot stand and will not be the story of our time.
Who is Karine Jean-Pierre even talking about there?
Who is Karine Jean-Pierre?
I think
talking about and talking to.
I think it should be illegal for anyone but the president to post from the president's account.
I completely agree. But
it should say POTUS little staffers or something.
No, that should be illegal.
The account.
It should be.
That should be the account. POTUS staff.
Can't
right,
they tweet
but this
from
account should only be the president due to the fact that it's public record as statements of the president.
Right. I feel like this is a statement from the Biden administration writ large. It's not the Biden
but that's
himself.
true of the White House. I mean, the White House puts out statements all the time that are attributed to Joe Biden, even though he is unlikely to have written them.
Yeah,
in theory, he would have read them and signed off on them, though.
Well,
I don't think that's actually what happens.
That he does that to all the briefings?
No, I don't even think this man reads any of the briefings, but that's because I don't trust him.
It should be a legal requirement that a president sign off on any statement attributed to the president for the sake of public records.
Yeah, he should sign off on it before he takes the documents and puts them in his garage.
Yeah.
That means if they want to write something on his behalf for Twitter, for X, then they have to get approval from him and he has to sign it. He has to sign off on it.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
He has to have his own tweets that have I'm Joe Biden and I approve this message line.
Right.
But this is basically more war posturing, right?
For sure.
The attack on one group is an attack on all of us. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
And they're going to say you're either with us or the terrorists, etc.
Yeah. Textbook.
Yeah. But I don't think that Joe Biden is in a position to argue with his own staff, right? I personally think Joe Biden would be happy to go to war, but on top of that, he's not checking his own Twitter. He's probably not reading the briefings. I mean, he is not in a position to challenge whichever staffer is saying, no, Mr. President, this is a good line. I mean, even last week when we had him say, I never thought I'd be able to confirm. He had that weird statement about the photos of the children. And then it was like,
The White
House
was
then
like,
fact-checked him.
This didn't happen.
Which is not a great look. I mean, Biden wants to go to war. His administration, his staffers underneath have their own reasons for wanting to go to war. And either way, it's going to hurt the American people.
Well, sure. That's what war does. I mean, unless we ramp up our munitions and actually start spending a lot of money and creating a better war machine and then getting rich off that like we've done countless times before. That's also effective.
I'm kind of noticing a pattern with how the way we withdrew from Afghanistan and then went to Ukraine, kind of noticing like they're kind of losing steam with the Ukraine thing. But now Israel's like the next big thing. So they're like, yeah, you know, it's kind of going to take a back seat to.
It's like the Eye of
Israel.
Sauron. You
Yeah.
know?
Take a look at this.
Zelensky must be so mad right
This
now.
just popped up right now on the website for the article we had. U.S. Secretary of State Blinken speaks after meeting with Israeli war cabinet for more than 7 hours. Watch on CNN. Well, we're not watching CNN, but that's the breaking news right now. He's speaking. I wonder what he'll be saying. We'll pick up those updates in a minute after they come out, you know, outside of the video. But I think we're dangerously close to World War III, and I think it's I mean, World War III, what does it even mean? I think at some point within the next 12 months, there's going to be a dramatic and massive mobilization. I mean, and it's not even a bold prediction to say something like that. We're looking at 2,000 Marines and sailors deploying to Israeli waters, and there's already warships there. So, like, if this escalates, wow, who could have seen that coming?
Iran is to Russia as Israel is to the United States, in my opinion. So I feel like if like what Lindsey Graham really wants to do this, like he is just so ready. But if we do something to Iran that's gonna get Russia involved, it would be my fear. And that would just be the escalation. And then if you have China and Taiwan happening kind of over there and a separate thing going on, like we're primed for escalations everywhere.
I wonder about how this could play out. I mean, the U.S. is still the most powerful military force. I mean, how many aircraft carriers do we have? We've got, I think, 11 active strike groups, and most other countries have one. So we're pretty dang powerful as a nation, because it's probably more than just a nation considering. But I wonder, I mean, does Russia and China enter this Middle Eastern conflict under the guise of the U.S. is going to cause nuclear war by, you know, and mass casualties, and we have to intervene? What if Russia and China decide to prevent U.S. involvement in the conflict entirely? They deploy troops into Syria and I don't know about Iran, but perhaps. I don't know if that would be the most strategic location.
Well, wasn't Israel taking shots at Syria today in Damascus? They were
today.
shooting at the
Iran. It's been ongoing nonstop
in Syria.
The Israeli strikes on Syria have been happening for a decade.
Well, sure, but I mean, just today.
There was something specific you saw today.
Yeah.
And Lebanon is targeting civilian communities in Israel. I mean, this is
Israel evacuated some of the north.
Yep.
You know, yeah. But Biden is going to visit Israel next week.
Now, for all those who are sitting
On
at home
Wednesday,
being like,
that's tomorrow.
I don't care about war. I don't know anything about this stuff. I'd be like, okay, well, you know, your gas prices are going to quadruple. You know, $6-7 gas.
Yeah,
A lot of these people are too young to even remember after 9/11 what happened with the economy and what happened with the gas prices, and you know, like
I don't remember that.
yeah, you don't.
I wonder
I'm also young.
how the U.S. is going to handle this.
Not because I'm young. I didn't have a car. I only
You weren't as
started.
affected by these things.
Yeah,
I have
started
questions
buying
about
gas
the
3 years ago.
I have questions about the people who are currently serving as the Marines who will be deployed to this region.
What are your questions?
Well, you know, I have to imagine they're on the younger side, likely Gen Z. I doubt they're sending a bunch of 40-year-olds, you know, so millennials, like mid to late 30s now on average, with some younger millennials down into like I think you could be late 20s and be millennial, right? Or
Yeah,
no?
you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it's mostly going to be Gen Z. So who's the kind of person who wants to enlist right now?
Someone who wants to do a lot of TikTok dances,
Yeah.
and be
You're
filmed.
big on drag queens.
I've heard this
and,
argument right now.
you know.
Well, did you guys know that you can get cosmetic surgeries if you enlist? That's so fun. That's so cool.
Yeah, they'll cut your dick off for you.
Yeah, they'll do anything. There's
Yeah.
an argument. Someone was like saying if you tell the Air Force that you and your wife are in a dispute because she needs a boob job, the Air Force will be like, well, to help your marriage, this is I don't know if
Could
that's
you
true at
imagine
all.
telling like Roman soldiers,
That's
join
true.
the army and we can cut your dick off
It's
for
insane.
you?
I mean, I think I remember this when I was, graduating high school, that student loan debt was so crazy that I knew a lot of people who were not interested in military service, but said, but if I enlist, I could potentially get it paid for through the GI, and I need to go to college to be able to succeed. And we've seen that argument sort of collapse the last couple of years. Enrollment's down. We know enlistment in the military service is down. So ultimately, the very few benefits to enlisting in the Army or in any sort of military branch are not as persuasive as they once were. My question is, are they going to try and sell it as a rallying point? I mean, after 9/11, we did see a lot of an increase in military enlistment. People saw it as their national duty. And I don't think people feel that sort of patriotic pride right now, especially, do you want to be enlisted under Biden? Probably
Definitely not. They've demonized nationalism completely. Like there's nobody. That's why they have a hiring crisis, because a lot of them would be like, I went to the service because my father served and my grandfather served.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.